Hello, it is time for some math, and today we're going to do workbook pages 118 and 119 together. So you're going to need your workbook page packet, and you want to open it up to page 118. It should say 118 on the bottom, and we're going to do 118 and 119. So you need a pencil, packet, let's ride. Remember, you're going to write down whatever I write down, please, and make sure you're listening as well. So generalized results, that means we're basically going to look at some patterns and come up with a rule from it. In the equations below, a and b are whole numbers greater than 1. So these variables you see down here with an a and b, anytime you see an a or a b, those represent a whole number that is more than 1. N over d, like numerator over denominator, is a fraction less than 1. So you're not ever going to have a situation where n is greater than d and will always be lower than d in these variables down here. It's a fraction less than 1. 1 over d is a unit fraction because it has a 1 in the numerator spot. And it asks you to answer the questions about the equations based on all of this. There is a nice little vocabulary review here. So we know that when we divide two numbers, the result is called a quotient. But the number that we are going to divide up is called the dividend. And the number that we're dividing it by is called the divisor. So 4 is the dividend, the number I'm dividing up. It's being divided by 1/3, the divisor, and the result of it gives us a quotient. Okay, so we're going to start off with multiplication. And with multiplication, this says a times b equals c. Now remember, a and b represent whole numbers greater than 1. The question is, will c be greater or less than a, and why? So I want you to think about this. If I'm multiplying two numbers that are greater than 1, am I going to get a result that is larger than my first factor or lower than my first factor? What do you think? If you're having a hard time with this one, let's just pop some numbers in there and see. So let's pick any two numbers that are greater than 1. So how about 2 and 3? Okay. So if we took 2 times 3, and the answer to should I write this is yes, then I know you were watching and paying attention. If we did use some numbers that this describes, 2 times 3, this is asking, will the result that I get be greater or less than 2? Because 2 is where a is. And isn't 2 times 3 6? So doesn't that mean that I get a greater result? Yes. So if you are multiplying two whole numbers that are greater than 1, your result is going to be greater than the factors, okay? And the reason that this happens, it's because the reason of it is because that a and b are greater than 1, okay? So if a and b are greater than 1, c will also be. That's what you learned a long time ago with multiplication, right? When you multiply two regular old numbers together before you were even introduced to fractions, we saw that our product is greater because you're saying that you have 2 3 times. So of course that means you're going to have more than 2 because you have 2 3 times. 2, 4, 6. Now in this question it says a times n over d equals c. And it wants to know, will c be greater than or less than a, and why? So in looking at this, do you think the result, c, is going to be more or less than a? And if you're not sure, let's plug some numbers in there. Okay, so a can be any whole number that is greater than 1. So how about 6 times, and now for n over d, this can be any fraction that we want as long as n is lower than d. So how about we multiply 6 by 2/3? And yes, you should write that. All right, so the question is this answer right here going to be more or less than 6? It is multiplication. I'm multiplying 6 by 2/3. Is it going to be more or less than a? So you can take your guess. Let's figure it out. I'm going to put the 1 underneath here. I can cross simplify with the 3 and the 6. And 2 times 2 is 4, and 1 times 1 is 1, and I get 4. Okay, now my question to you is 4 less than 6? Because A was 6. Yes, it is. So will C be less than A? Yes, it will be. It's less. Now it asks why. Why do you think we just multiplied and got something less than what we started with? Up here when we multiplied, we got something more than what we started with, but here we got something less than what we started with. The reason is, it's because C is only a fraction of A. See, if you had A one time, it would be the same, right? If you have A more than one time, it's going to be more than A. But this is saying that you have A less than one time, because isn't 2/3 less than 1? So we can say, because we have A less than one time. And if you don't even have it one whole time, of course you're going to get something less than what you start with. Okay, now we're going to look at some division. And again, remember, A and B are whole numbers that are greater than 1. And this says, will C be greater or less than A? Why? All right, so in looking at this, A divided by B equals C, if we're not sure if C is going to be more or less than A, let's plug some numbers in. And I'm just going to choose some numbers that are easy to divide. Like, how about 12 divided by 4? Yes, write it. So 12 divided by 4. This is asking you, will this C be greater or less than 12? It's going to be less, isn't it? 12 divided by 4 is 3. So it's less. And it's asking why. So why do we get something less? Well, it's because we're dividing a whole number into parts, right? We are dividing a whole number. I'm going to use a number sign, hashtag for you. A whole number into parts. So each part will be less than A, because you only have part of it. We don't have the whole thing. All right, so we are dividing a whole number into parts, so each part will be less than A, because you're taking like a larger number and dividing it into smaller pieces. So we're going to end up with something lower. Okay, now I have A divided by a unit fraction here, 1 over D equals C. And I want to know, is C going to be greater than or less than A? And if so, why? So again, let's use some regular old numbers in here to see if we can figure this out. So A, we can use any number we want. How about 6? 6 divided by 1 over, and we can have any denominator we want except for 1. So how about 2? All right, so this question is saying, is the result that I get going to be more or less than 6? Well, let's solve it. Okay, take a guess and let's solve it. If you have 6 divided by 1/2, we know that's the same thing as 6 times 2 over 1, or just 2. And what's 6 times 2? It's 12. So 6 divided by 1/2, this means that there are 12 1/2s in 6, right? I'm dividing 6 into halves, and yeah, 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2 plus 1/2. If I have 12 1/2s, I would have 6. So my result is actually greater, even though it's a division problem. I know it's crazy, but when you divide by something that is less than 1, you're dividing it up into smaller parts, all right? So why does this happen? It happens because dividing by 1 over D is the same as multiplying by the denominator, right? And if you multiply 6 by a whole number, you're going to get something greater. We saw that right up here. So why will C be greater? Because dividing by 1 over D is the same as multiplying the whole number D. All right? So I know, it's kind of it's very unique, isn't it? You thought we probably thought you knew everything there was to know about multiplication and division. Normally when you multiply two whole numbers, we get a product that is greater than each of the factors, right? And normally when we divide, we get an answer that is lower than what we're, dividing up. However, if you are multiplying by a fraction, that's saying that you have this less than one time. And if you have an amount less than one time, it's going to have to be less than what you start with because you don't even have it a whole time. If we are dividing by a fraction of an amount, then that's a lot of pieces, right? And this is the same thing as multiplying a by d. So dividing by 1 over something is the same thing as multiplying by that denominator. All right, so down here it says to circle the problem with the greater answer. So there's two problems here. This is a problem and this is a problem, okay? So circle the problem with the greater answer. Which of these would give us a greater amount? Multiplying a whole number by another whole number or dividing a whole number by another whole number? Well, nothing has changed about multiplying and dividing whole numbers. When you multiply whole numbers, you get an amount that is greater than dividing, right? So we would definitely get a greater amount if we multiplied those two same numbers versus dividing them. Now look at number 12. Here I have 347 times 1 over 72. And here I have 347 divided by 1 over 72. So I want to know which of these would give us a greater result. So with 347 times 1 over 72, this is like saying A times N over D. This means that I have 347 1/72 of a time. So I don't even have one whole 347. This one, if I'm dividing by 1 over 72, this is the same thing as saying 347 times 72. So which would give you more? This one would. So if you are dividing by a unit fraction, you're going to get an amount that's greater than what you started with. All right, I want you to turn your page. We're going to look at page 119 right now. And I want us to use what we just learned to predict the size of the results. So this says to decide what operation to use, predict the size of the result, then solve the problem. Lucy spends 4 hours a week babysitting. Her sister Lily spends 7/8 as much time babysitting. Does Lily babysit for more or less than 4 hours? Okay, so first off, we'd have to figure out which operation we would want to use for this. So if Lucy spends 4 hours a week and her sister spends 7/8 as much time, this is saying 7/8 of that 4. Okay, this is part of that whole amount. She spends part of that whole amount. What operation is part of the whole? That is multiplication. So we would have to use multiplication to solve this. And this is asking, does Lily babysit more or less than 4 hours? Well, Lily spends 7/8 of that 4. 8/8 would be 1 whole of the 4. 7/8 means less than 1 4. So the amount that you get should be less. Lily ends up spending less time babysitting. So now it says find the exact amount. Well, we just said it's multiplication, right? So we need to take 4 times 7/8. Let's solve it out. And put a 1 underneath that 4. Let's cross simplify. 4 goes into 4 once and into 8 twice. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 2 is 2. Let's change this to a mixed number. 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 plus 1 is 7. So she babysits for 3.5 hours. Is 3.5 hours less than 4 hours? You betcha. All right, Yoshi has a rope that is 30 feet long. He must cut it into pieces that are 1/4 of a foot long. Will he get more or fewer than 30 pieces? Okay, so picture this. He has 30 feet of rope and he's cutting it into 1/4 of a foot pieces, right? So what is he doing? What operation is he doing? He's dividing up this 30 feet of rope into 1/4. So picture stretching out this rope and cutting up every 4th, all right? So this is definitely division. And will he get more or fewer than 30 pieces? If the rope is 30 feet long and each one is 1/4 of a foot, like each piece, wouldn't it mean that for every 1 foot I'd have 4 pieces? So if there's 30 feet, I'd end up getting 30 times 4 pieces. You should definitely get more than 30 pieces. That says more. Sorry, my R kind of connected to the E. It's more. A little bit more, a little bit more. Now it says find the exact number of pieces Yoshi will get. Well, we already said division, right? So you have to ask yourself, which one of those do I start with? What do we have that we're dividing up? The 30 feet of rope. So you should start with 30, and we're dividing that into pieces that are 1/4 of a foot each. Now when we solve this, we can use our inverses and do 30 times the denominator, or the reciprocal, right? 30 times 4 over 1, or 30 times 4. And I know that 3 times 4 is 12, and this is a multiple of 10, so I just get to put my 0 right there. And it's 120 pieces. Is 120 pieces more than 30? It sure is, so we were right. Okay, Carlos can throw a ball 14 yards. His friend Raul can throw 3/7 of that distance. Is Raul's throw longer or shorter than 14 yards? Okay, first off, what operation are we going to use? It says that Raul can throw it 3/7 of 14. So if we have 3/7 of 14, that's part of a whole, that's multiplication. Multiplication. And now I want to know, is Raul's throw going to be more or less than 14? Well, Raul only throws 3/7 of that, right? 7/7 would mean he threw 14. 3/7 mean that 14 happens less than one time, because 3/7 is less than 1. So we should definitely get an amount that is shorter than 14 yards. So let's figure it out. Find the exact length of Raul's throw. So we want to take 14 times 3/7. So let's go ahead and put a 1 underneath there. I'm going to cross simplify. I just divided 7 by 7 to get 1, and 14 by 7 to get 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 1 is 1. And yeah, 6 divided by 1 is 6. And we're dealing with yards. So 6 yards is how much he throws it. And that makes sense, right? That's less than 14, and he only throws 3/7 of 14. So there we go. We're on our last one. An apple orchard covers 12 acres. There is a watering spout for every 1/4 of an acre. Are there more or fewer than 12 watering spouts? So we have to ask ourselves, is this multiplication or division? Well, it says that there's a total of 12 acres, and there's a watering spout for every 1/4 acre. So we want to see how many 1/4 there are in 12. We're dividing that 12 up by 1/4. So this is division. I'm going to go ahead and write that down. Division, you should too. And it wants to know, are there more than 12? Well, the orchard covers 12 acres, and it says there's a water spout for every, sorry about the bell. We'll just wait for it. Okay, there's a water spout for every 1/4 of an acre. So if there's one for every 1/4 of an acre, wouldn't there be 4 1/4 in 1 acre? So you would have 1/4 4 times for every 1. That means for 12, I would end up with 12 times 4. So this answer should be more. We don't just have 1 per acre, right? We have 1/4 every single acre, so that's going to happen over and over again. All right, so let's find the exact number. What are we starting with? We're starting with the acres, and we're dividing that up into fourths. I want to know how many 1/4 there are in 12. We can get that answer by multiplying 12 by 4, right? The reciprocal of 1/4 is 4. So 48 spouts. Here's my handle, here's my spout. And 48 is more than 12, so we did it right. Yay! All right, thank you so much for watching. Good job today. Thanks for working so hard.